that's an accusation against His character. It's about like people that can't afford to pay their tithes. God, my 10% can take care of my today better than my faith in your ability. And that's where God said tithing. He says, if you rob me from tithe and offerings, He said, you're cheating me out of the ability of being to you who I am. He said, you're not letting me be your Rapha, you're not letting me be your healer, not letting me be your Jireh, your provider. He said, you're not letting me be who I am to you because you're assassinating me with your attitude of no trust. Because love believes the best. Love endures long. Love suffers long. And love takes no account of evil done to it. But all of us have had a time in our lives where it looked like God let us down. Yeah. Last time I was in France in July. Landed in Paris, France, July the 8th. At the airport, first time out of 9 trips to Europe. Nobody met me at the airport. I had 35 American dollars in my pocket and no credit cards that worked. Because they didn't have no money available. So I had 35 US dollars. Nobody met me at the airport. Nobody had a sign that said Mark White. That was going, and I find them, I follow them, get in their car, can't speak French, and they're going to take me somewhere. Nobody was there for me, and I only had $35. What do? I practice what I preach. To trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not to your own understanding. See, you never need a miracle till you need a miracle. But the one thing that we are needing right now is not a miracle in our government, not a miracle in our nation. We need a miracle in our church. We need a heart after God where there are people that hunger and thirst after righteousness, of standing before God and knowing not that He is just looking at your past and it's covered by the blood, but He's looking at your future and He is saying, well done, thou good and faithful servant. See, the issue is not what happens to you. It's how you respond. Don't tell me you trust in the Lord and you're walking around pining and whining and sorrow. You're dining because you've given all hope up. Because faith without hope is dead. You've got to feed your hope. Because if you don't have no hope, you can't cope. And faith without hope is hopeless. So faith is a substance of expectancy. And now is the moment of audacity where God can produce a miracle amongst miracles. Because you never need a miracle till you need a miracle. There I was, July the 12th. I'd preached Sunday morning in one church. And I was lined up to preach. God got me places to preach. While I was there, God keeps me busy every time I go to Europe. But my translators, interpreters, they took my schedule and kind of messed things up. And I was scheduled to preach in Paris, France at up to 12. And at 1 o'clock I was supposed to preach in Normandy, France, which happened to be a 3-hour drive. Now how they got congealed, I don't know. But here I am with somebody. I'm riding in a car with people that can't speak English. I know I'm supposed to be there at 1 o'clock. But here it is, 2:30, and we ain't there yet. And that pastor calls my cell phone and he says, we're waiting on you, we're waiting on you. And when I got there, that church had waited 3 hours for me to preach. Over 75 people standing in that building waiting on me to come preach. Well, when I got there, the power of God began to flow. One man had the crutches with the handlebars where he couldn't walk without these crutches because he had been run over by an 18-wheeler, 5 years earlier. And for 5 years, he could not walk. He was like a robot holding on to this metal thing on both arms, where he could walk. Power of God came on him. He fell out. He dropped the crutches. He's out on the ground in the front of the church. All at once, he was trying to help him up. I said, leave him alone. I walk over, I grab his hand, I help him up, I tell him to bend his knees. He begins to bend his knees, and within 15 minutes, that man took off running. He ran out of the church, run up and down the street in front of the church without his metal, crutches or whatever they were. See, a miracle is what God is doing right now. You know, when the prophet was there on the city walls and the enemy was surrounding his city and everybody's freaking out, saying, what do we do? And he prayed, said, God, open his eyes. And then all at once the prophet told him, said, those that are with us are more than those that are against us. Your moment will pass, but your future is guaranteed. But you must trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding, but faith without patience can't work. And patience is a stabilizing force where I need peace that surpasses all understanding, Lord. Can you help? Because you're talking to the Prince of Peace. And He is the Prince of Peace. And the Word says, of His governments there'll be no end in Isaiah 9. But some of us come to a dead end stop and say, God, I can't trust you past my moment. So I'm not going to give you no more say-so over my tomorrow. Does that sound like a lot of us? We've been there. Where, God, I trust you, but I feel hideous. God, I'm afraid. God, where am I going? Have you forsaken me? And it's just like Peter. Jesus is looking at him and said, Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me with all that's within you? And Peter says, Lord, you know I love you as a friend. Jesus said, do you agape me? Peter said, but Lord, I phileo you. And the reason Peter dropped his level of commitment down was to protect Peter. Because Peter had an encounter with God. Peter saw Moses and Elijah on the mountain, and God interrupted him. Peter walked on water, but every time Peter started to mess up, God was there to fix it. But when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, where were you at, Lord? And Peter grieved himself and wept because he failed not only God, but he failed his ability to believe that he was strong in the Lord. See, sometimes we don't understand that we have faith when we don't have faith, because we still have a faithful God. When we have no faith, He is still faithful. He is faithful when all seems to turn against you. What God cannot lie. So I just want to give you, in the few minutes I've got retaining left, He said to trust in the Lord with all thy heart and lean not to your own understanding. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 11 verse 28, He said, learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light, and I will give rest unto your souls. Rest, peace that surpasses all understanding, a joy that is unspeakable. Jesus said in John 8, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. But what am I getting free from? Free of sin? Sin is not the issue in the kingdom of God. Not having faith is the issue in the kingdom of God. Because what's not of faith is sin. And what God is talking about in Romans 14:23, what's not of faith is sin. Anything that takes you away from the presence of God is sin. And there's not levels of sin. Adultery is not the higher level of sin, and lying a lower level of sin. What's not of faith is sin. And doubting God is as big of a sin as a liar. Because you're saying one thing with your actions and thinking another thing with your thoughts. And the Word says, be doers of the Word and not hearers only. I remember when I went before the Assemblies of God to get my credentials in 1977. Cecil Janway asked me a question to my face. And he said, he tried to word it very politely. You know, he said, do you preach one thing and then live another? And I interrupted him. I said, do you mean practice what I preach? He said, yeah. I said, yes, sir. It is so easy to preach faith, but it's another thing to live it. It is so easy to say that my trust is in the Lord. My hope is in the Lord. It is so easy to sing the songs of Zion. It is so easy to say you're in faith when you wake up, but when there's no food in the cabinet, when the lights have been cut off, when there's no money to pay your bills, you say, where is God? And the same thing happened to Peter. Lord, I'm denying you and I can't stop it. And I don't know what to do.